Hey guys, so today we've got chapter 17, which is about manifest destiny. And this chapter is also the start of time period 5, which is really our last time period before Christmas break. So that's exciting. It starts in 1844 with Manifest Destiny, the Mexican American War, the Oregon Trail. All of that is in this chapter. And then it ends after the Civil War with the end of Reconstruction in 1877. So, where this chapter picks up, William Henry Harrison has been elected president for the Whig Party. If you remember, he was the war hero from the War of 1812, Battle of Tippecanoe. Uh, what most people remember about William Henry Harrison is that he was the shortest time in office for any president. So he gives his inauguration address out in the cold. It's really long. He catches pneumonia and dies 32 days into office. So his Secretary of State is a guy named Daniel Webster, who's going to be significant. And then Henry Clay, told you he is immortal. He is still around. He is still a prominent figure in the Senate. So his vice president, who becomes president when Harrison dies, is John Tyler. He's a Virginian. He is a Whig, technically, but a lot of the actions he's going to take as president look more like a Democrat, which is the other party at the time. So his own party is not going to like that very much. So Henry Clay proposes a new Bank of the United States. If you remember, Andrew Jackson had killed the second bank, removed all the deposits, vetoed the recharter. So Tyler, who is the same party as Henry Clay, vetoes the bill to create a new bank. And Clay is like, what the heck are you doing? You're supposed to be in my party. Why are you stopping us from doing all these things that we're trying to do? So basically, they kick John Tyler out of his own party. His whole cabinet resigns. Say, good luck, but we're not backing you anymore. So he's the sitting president, but really doesn't even have a party that he's a part of at this point. Meanwhile, this is kind of a random side note. There is some fighting going on. I don't have a map on here, but picture like northern Maine, the very top of the United States. Disputes between the United States and Britain over who owns what land. It's mainly a bunch of like lumberjacks out in the forest fighting over whose trees are whose. We call this the Aroostook War. Um, Daniel Webster and Lord Ashburton from Britain end up signing a treaty. They make a compromise because the British, what they really wanted was a route for a road. That's why they were claiming certain portions of this land. But the United States ends up getting more of the square miles as long as the British get the route for their road, so everyone is happy. It's just an example of several of these disagreements. Also, an example of us expanding our territory during this age of manifest destiny. Even though it's not out west, like much of our land acquisition is going to be, it is more land for the United States. Texas. So, I'm sure you know, Texas was once part of Mexico. Mexico viewed it as like just a province in revolt. Like they're just having a little rebellion. They'll be back. They're just trying to be silly. So Britain wants Texas to be independent. And you think, why does Britain care what Texas is? Well, there's a few reasons. They think it'll be a distraction that maybe they could move back in and claim some land. They could trade freely. Because remember, this is the age of the American system of high tariffs, and the British have to pay taxes to trade with Americans. So if Texas is its own country, they could trade with it without paying tariffs. They could end slavery there. They could get cotton from Texas and not have to rely on the American South. So all of these are appealing. The British really want Texas to break off and be its own country. So this issue comes in 1844 about whether Texas is going to remain independent or whether they're going to join the United States. So Polk, James K. Polk, defeats Henry Clay, who, yes, ran again and lost again for president, but he's the real MVP. It wasn't for lack of trying. He tried over and over and over and over to be president, and he just never won. So John Tyler, who's still in office for a few more weeks before Polk takes over, when a Democrat Polk won the election, he views it as a mandate or a message from the voters that they want Texas, because that was part of what Polk was running on. So this is like the one thing John Tyler accomplished in office, was to get Texas added or annexed to the United States. So 3 days before he leaves office, it's passed by Congress through joint resolution. So this is where Texas is added or annexed to the United States. Something to note, people always get confused on this. We get Texas before the Mexican-American War. That wasn't part of what we get from Mexico after the Mexican-American War. We call that the Mexican Cession. It's the Southwest and California. Texas is not a part of that. It is added on its own before the Mexican-American War. So they had been independent for 9 years. They were the Lone Star Republic, and then they became a state in the United States. Oregon, so later this week, we'll get to experience the Oregon Trail firsthand. If you remember, in 1818, we signed a treaty with the British that we would share the Oregon Territory. So thousands of American settlers to flock to Oregon, where some of them have a very rough time. This was not an easy trip. It is a months-long trip full of all kinds of difficulties that people would experience trying to get there. By the 1840s, there are way more Americans than British. So the Americans start to feel like they should have ownership of Oregon and not share it with the British. And once again, we can't agree on what the border should be. Oh, this made me laugh. If you've ever played the old school Oregon Trail game, you're playing Oregon Trail, you run into a man named Terry. You laugh at him and say, "That's a girly name. Terry shoots you. You have died from dysentery." Huh. It's a good one. So we will do a simulation of the Oregon Trail later this week, and possibly you might die from dysentery during that game. We will see. So manifest destiny, this is like the term to know from this chapter. It is this idea that America was destined, ordained by God to stretch from coast to coast. So from East Coast all the way to California. I'm sure you've seen this painting before. It's called American Progress. And it represents manifest destiny, this angel like bringing technology and progress, bringing light to the West, to the darkness. And that's what this period in American history is known for. So Polk ran, they called him like a dark horse candidate, like he came out of nowhere. No one really knew him, but then he won the election. Henry Clay tried to flip-flop or like straddle the Texas issue, but it really backfired on him. That's part of the reason Polk was able to defeat him. So Polk had a 4-point program. The biggest one here is going to be to get California, because it's going to require a war for that to happen, but he does accomplish that. When it came to Oregon, he ran, part of his election slogan was 54-40 or fight, which is just the parallel. I have a map here in a minute. That we were going to go for like the higher latitude. We wanted more of Oregon than the British were willing to give. Eventually, he makes a deal with the British. We draw that line at the 49th parallel, which is still our northern border with Canada. So here's the 54-40 line. This is what he ran on, his slogan, 54-40. So give us this border or we will fight you, Britain. But we end up making this agreement right here. So that's why that's the northern boundary of Washington State in Oregon. So Mexican-American War, other most important thing in this chapter, very important. Polk wants to buy California, so he was willing to pay for it. He sends someone to offer money for it, and they're going to be shot down. So if you look at a map of southern Texas, there are a couple of rivers, and Texas thought that one of these rivers was the southern border, whereas Mexico thought it was the Rio Grande. So there's this disputed territory that both sides claim as theirs. So he sends this guy named Slidell to Mexico to offer $25 million just for California and the area out west. They don't even agree to meet with him. They just totally dismiss him, ignore him. So Polk says, fine, you want to do this the hard way? We'll do this the hard way. I was willing to pay for it, but now we're just going to fight you for it and take it. So what he does is he sends Zachary Taylor, general, and his forces to the Rio Grande, which he knows the Mexicans believe is their territory, basically saying, go stand there until they shoot at you so that I'll have a reason to call for war. Because we'll say, they shot first, they took the offensive action, we were just hanging out there on our territory, when he knows it's not ours. So inevitably, they do shoot at Taylor's forces. He says, look, Congress, they're shedding American blood on American soil. It's disputed territory, but that doesn't matter. This is where Abraham Lincoln, sorry, this made me laugh, so I had to put it. It says when you try to type Babe, but accidentally type Abe. Ha. But young Abraham Lincoln is a congressman. He's a Whig at this point. That's his party. He comes in and says, hey, I'm just curious. Can you show me the exact spot where this happened? Because he's doubting Polk's motives for sending these troops where he sent them, basically calling him out for provoking this war on purpose. This is where Lincoln first gets his, national fame, is for these spot resolutions, calling into question the start of the Mexican-American War. So everyone forgets about this war. If you ask like an average person on the street, they might even be like, we fought Mexico? What? Like they don't even remember that this existed. Or they get it confused with the Spanish-American War, which is coming later during imperialism. So the one thing you have to remember, just think of this. Polk poked Mexico. So think of James K. Polk taking his finger and poking Mexico and provoking them into a war. So he sent troops to stand right here so that Mexico would shoot at them so that he could go take California and have a reason for it. So what caused the Mexican-American War? Polk poked Mexico. Got it. So the war goes pretty well for the Americans. As soon as California is secured, he's willing to negotiate a peace. Proof that that's all Polk wanted out of this is California. So he sends a guy named Samuel Trist to negotiate the treaty. The treaty is pretty notable. It's in red. It's important. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, 1848. This gives California and all of what is now the American Southwest to the United States. We do end up paying $15 million for the land, which if you remember, if they had just taken the first deal, they would have gotten 25 million and no war, but they still get 15 million. But this is a huge land gain for the United States. And this is just a map that shows that really Manifest Destiny is completed because of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So finally, land increases by 1/3 more than the Louisiana Purchase. So this is a huge gain. I'll show you the map here in a minute. Mexican-American War, a lot of the troops that fight in that are going to be the same ones that are going to fight in the Civil War. So it's really like a practice war for what is to come. The biggest impact, the biggest effect of the Mexican-American War, obviously this land gain is huge, but the question now becomes, will there be slavery in the Mexican Cession, which is just that territory ceded from Mexico? So there is something passed in the Senate called the Wilmot Proviso, or it's proposed, let me put it that way. It never technically passes, but it is proposed, and it says there should be no slavery in the territory gained from Mexico. And it is going to lead to this huge debate called the free soil debate. Like, should that territory have slavery or not? And really, you can trace the Mexican Cession directly to the Civil War, just because it heats up that debate about slavery that had really been kind of solved temporarily by the Missouri Compromise. This is going to throw it right back into the sphere of arguing. So let's click this so you can see what I was talking about. Oh, just kidding. I need the latest version of Flash Player. But either way, you can look it up and see the addition of that Mexican Cession completes Manifest Destiny as we know it. So it is accomplished under Polk.